to write poetry. Whatever I started to see on the block, I would just go in my room and I would put it down in the form of a song. So if I see something within drug dealing or fighting, I would go and I would put it in a song. And at a very young age, even though I had the gun crime affected my life at a very young age, it seemed as if me and my brothers and my cousin, we was fascinated with that type of stuff. We was fascinated with the gun life. We was fascinated with it. I remember the first time my cousin brought a gun in the house, it was as if he brought a gold mountain in the house. For some reason, I was just attracted to that lifestyle. So I was able to use that and put it into music. I also had a childhood friend by the name of Yafeo. And back in the day, we used to celebrate our birthdays together. Of course, we know this is before I became a Muslim. As Muslims, we don't celebrate birthdays. It's clear that the Prophet ﷺ said only celebrate the 2 Eids. He made it very clear. So after that, they used to come pick me up, take me to the suburbs where she stayed at, and me and Yafeo, we would just kick it and celebrate our birthdays. She lived in the suburbs, where it was every year I look forward to this event to this day. And years went past, and I lost contact with Yafeo. And I happened to run into his mother, and I said, "How was he doing?" She said, he lived in Atlanta, Georgia with his brother named Tupac Shakur. And she asked me, did you know who Tupac is? And at this time, Pac, he was known because he already put out one record that sold millions of records already. And at this time, he was already involved in movies. So I said, yeah, I know who Pac is. And I said, as a matter of fact, I'm trying to pursue a career in the music industry myself. So she said, well, Yafeo and Tupac is on their way to New York City. Why don't you go meet them when they come around? So my part of New Jersey was basically literally about 30 minutes away from Manhattan, 30 minutes away from New York City. So I remember getting on the train, getting to the hotel room, and I was excited because I didn't see Yafeo in years. And I walked in the hotel room, and I was able to see Cash, Katari, Malcolm, and I remember when Pac walked in the room. And Pac, at this time, he already had a reputation because he had a group called Thug Life. And at this time, he was already arrested for shooting 2 off-duty police. And he shot 2 off-duty police. He was going to trial and he beat it. So he already had a name for himself on the streets. So when Pac came in the room, I'm thinking he was going to come in the room all wild and just... But he came in the room, he was very calm. He was very calm and he was very humble. And he's like, I heard a lot about you, this and this. What happened to your mother and father? Let me hear a little bit. And I remember when I started telling him about the story of my mother and father, he started to cry. Now for me, this was a shocker because, like I said, this is supposed to be the #1 gangster rap at this time. So for me to see him crying, it was a shock to me because also no one reacted over the story of the death of my mother and father the way he did. So when he started to cry, I was very surprised because in my neighborhood, I had many of friends who didn't have a father, many of friends who didn't have a mother, and the way I grew up, I never once thought something wrong because I didn't have a mother and father. I never just dwelled on it. I thought it was part of life. I said life goes on, keep it moving. So when Pac started crying, I was very surprised. And I remember he said that I want to put a group together and I want you to be involved with this group. And I thought he was just talking because if anybody ever ran into a rap artist or tried to get a career in that type of industry, you notice you'll run across people, especially out here in Hollywood, where they always say, I'm going to come back, I'm going to put you on, I really want to do business with you. And I thought Pac was one of the same type of cats. I said, man, this dude is lying in my face. All right, no problem. If you want to see me, just holler at me. You know what I mean? And eventually, a few months later, I was able to go to Atlanta. I moved down to Atlanta, and I went to the house with Tupac. And basically, man, I think I just forced myself in his house, man. I think he told me to come visit him, and I never left. So I remember going there, and I went in the house, and next thing I know, I was living in the house. All my clothes from New Jersey was down there. And Pac, he wanted to put a rap group together. And he said that he wanted to, first we was called the Young Thugs, then we went to Dramacidal, and then we ended up being the Outlawz. And how we got the name Outlawz, because Pac said he wanted to be different than all the other rap groups. At this time, they had rap groups like Wu-Tang Clan. And Wu-Tang Clan, for example, they started to change their name to so-called Italian Mafias, if anybody remember. And most of the rappers, they was changing their name to Italian gangsters, like Scarface, the Wu-Tang Clan, they changed their name to a lot of Italian Mafias. So Pac said, I want to do something different. He said, I want to take it on another level. He said, I want to give y'all names of so-called enemies of America, or so-called tyrants of the world. I want to give y'all name that the people hate. So we sat and he started to give us the names one by one. Yafeo, he gave him the name Gaddafi, after the Libyan president Muammar Gaddafi. And back then, you know, they had no ties with America. Another member of the Outlawz, Katari, he gave him the name Castro after the Cuban president, Fidel Castro. Another member, he gave the name Hussein. Not after the President Hussein that we had, but Saddam Hussein, from the former president of Iraq. He gave another member of the Outlawz, Malcolm, the name Idi Amin after the Uganda president. And when I was young, I used to have a very bad temper. Me and my brothers, especially my little brother, we used to have like very, very harsh tempers. And I remember my African-American side of the family, they used to always blame it on my Puerto Rican side of the family. Every time we get upset, they used to say, you crazy Cubans, you crazy Puerto Ricans, you just like your mother. This is all I remember growing up. You crazy Puerto Ricans, etc. So when I met Pop, I kind of brought that same little temper with me and that same attitude. And we had an inside joke where Pop used to start saying, man, the reason why you're mad at the world and the reason why you're having tempers is because of your height. He used to say, I'm short, so I'm mad at the world. He said you have the short man complex. In other words, that's called the Napoleonic complex, and that's how I got the name Napoleon after the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. So after he put together this rap group called the Outlawz, the first record that I performed on was a record called Me Against the World, and it sold 3 million records. So this was a huge accomplishment for me because one day I literally was on a block, You know how you might have some rappers that say they was on a block? I literally used to hang on the block every single day. I seen it, I was in the middle of it. So one day to go from that to be on a record selling 3 million records, I was very excited. But I remember at this time, everything was moving smooth, and we got a phone call late at night, because Tupac went to New York City from Atlanta, and we got a phone call that Pac just got shot. So I said, oh man, what is happening, what's going on? And we find out that Pac, if anybody familiar with his career, they remember that when he went into the elevator, he was going to a recording studio, he walked into an elevator and 2 gunmen followed him. They pulled out their guns, and Pac, being who he was, he wouldn't allow that. He wouldn't allow a person just to pull a gun up to him and say, give me your jewelry. And from his own words, he said, I knew for a fact the way they looked in their eyes that they was going to kill me. He said, so if I'm going to die, I'm just going to go out fighting. So he grabbed the gun and started fighting the guy. But eventually he ended up getting shot 5 times. He got shot twice in the head, and he got shot in other parts of his body. And I remember in his own words, he said that before he got shot, he used to always feel like he had someone that was protecting him. He said, I always felt like I had a little man or something with me that was protecting me. He said, but after I got shot, for some reason, I feel like it's not there anymore. And he was thankful that he knew that it was God that really protected him and saved him, because he said in his own words, he remembered when he was on the elevator floor, he remembered the guy pointed the gun to him and shot. He said, I remember he shot right at my face, and all I remember is going out. I blanked out. And that's when he got shot the first time in the head. And then he said, all I remember is hearing a loud bang again, and I woke up. And that's when he got shot twice in the head. But for some reason, because Allah knew it wasn't his time, that the bullets even hit his head, but they never penetrated. So after that, Tupac, he went to the hospital the very same night. He checked himself out of the hospital. Most people probably listen to his music, and you would say that this was a very paranoid individual. But they don't know that the people that shot Pac up, they was real gangsters from the streets. These wasn't just normal gangsters, man. These was gangsters that was riding around in private helicopters. They had private planes. They had a lot of money. They was very powerful people from the street. And they was calling the hospital, and they was calling Pac, and they was calling his friends, and they was saying they're going to finish him off. So Pac said this is the reason why he had to check himself out of the hospital. And this is one of the reasons why it reflected in his music that he was very paranoid, because he literally had people that was calling saying, we're going to kill you. So right after Pac got shot, the reason why he was in New York City is because he was going through a lawsuit. He was going through a case, that there was some accusation that a lady said he done something, and from that charge he eventually got locked up. And when he got locked up, they charged him and arrested him and gave him about 1.5 years in prison. Well, I think they gave him more time than that, but he did about 1.5 years in prison. And while he was locked up, the word on the streets and the word in the prison, the people that did this to Pac, they were saying they're going to finish him off. He knew that they were some serious people. So Pac was looking for a way for some allies, because during the time he got shot, most of his best friends that he thought was his best friends, they ended up switching the side. They turned his back on him. Then he found out that some of the people that was very close to him actually planned to set him up. You know what I mean? So after that, it was 2 people that wanted to bail Pac out of jail. The first person that offered to bail him out of jail was Madonna. Believe it or not, Pac and Madonna, they was friends. And the second guy that who offered to bail Tupac out was a guy named Suge Knight. Anybody familiar with Suge Knight? Now, Suge Knight at this time, he was running a record label called Death Row Records. At this time, Death Row Records was the #1 rap artist, the #1 rap label. They had artists such as Snoop Dogg, they had artists such as Dr. Dre, Lady Ray, Dogg Pound, etc. For example, if it wasn't for Dr. Dre, you wouldn't have rap